Welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk. TrueNAS 2510 is out and already over 20,000 systems in less than 2 weeks. We'll address some of your initial feedback on it today. We've also got a whole pile of viewer questions, from pre-flashed USB keys with TrueNAS installed on it to hard drive spin down, should you do it or not. Stick around. With the 25.10 release of TrueNAS now a week or two into the wild, we've been monitoring your feedback closely, the reported issues, and of course the discussion surrounding it. The adoption rates are very good. We've got 20,000 plus systems in, less than 2 weeks here, Chris. We do have a list of things to fix for the first point release, 25.10.1, planned for December. Overall, the update to issue ratio looks pretty good for a .0 release. A quick reminder there, though, when you are moving between major versions, so the 25.04 up to 25.10, please make sure you do a force refresh or, clear the browser cache of the local site. Some of those UI components probably changed versions, and we have seen some people saying, hey, my reporting didn't work for 20, 30 minutes after the upgrade. My dashboard widgets are broken. Do one of those forced refreshes, go into your browser, clear out the cache for your TrueNAS system, or, give TrueNAS Connect a shot and see if it'll show you what you want there live.
Yeah, again, it usually works. A lot of times it'll try and do a refresh of all the browser contents locally, but there's a lot of different browser settings, plugins, extensions, and other things. And so we occasionally see this where you'll have to go and just say force refresh everything. But when in doubt, do that first before you file a ticket and see if that takes care of it, because 99% of the time it does.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of, having to reboot your system back in the day to make sure you didn't have something stuck, some process going in the background. All right. Well, speaking of the discussion, we know there's been some controversy around this one. You saw the stick of dynamite in our last thumbnail. We knew it was going to be a bit of a controversial topic. So the two controversial topics that have generated discussion has been the NVIDIA driver removal changes and the changes to smart integration. Notice I didn't say removal of smart.
Yeah.
The NVIDIA situation, I think. Yeah. The NVIDIA situation is pretty well understood, even if some of you aren't happy about the default support for the 10 series being dropped from the default to the most recent driver. But that's something that's even happening in the open source Nouveau and their upcoming replacement for it, the Rust-based Nova driver. They're dropping those pre-GSP cards because that GPU system processor is now an integral part of the firmware security and the secure boot process. This is the secure boot process of the GPU because they're basically tiny little computers. I mean, we'd love to have a 15 or 20 year longevity on the drivers, but unfortunately it's not our driver to write. We've seen controversy now from both Team Green and Team Red on the GPU side about that. Hey, thankfully the Intel i9-15 driver is still living quite merrily in kernel. I haven't had many issues with that one. Wouldn't play many games on it, but it's handling a lot of other things quite well.
Yeah, for transcode and other stuff, as long as it gets the job done, right? And of course, folks will have a whack at getting some updates on those in-kernel drivers when 2604 drops here next year as well. That'll come with a newer kernel, so we'll be interested to see. But at the end of the day, again, we're basically having to follow what Upstream does in this case, which is those drivers are being deprecated for some of the older systems, older cards.
Yep. There is the tweak in there that you can apply if you want to sort of restore the functionality of your 10 series card. It's out there on the forums. We'll link it again down below in the description for how to get that back. That's, again, something that our community came up with. And, we appreciate that you've given people options. We like it.
Sounds good.
But
okay, well, let's get into the meat of it now on the smart side. This one has generated a lot more, we'll say, very spirited debate and discussion from our user base. So to quickly recap the situation for those who are just catching up and tuning in, if you haven't caught on to this yet, in 25.10, the previous smart scheduling GUIs that let the administrator define when and where to run specific smart tasks on their drives was retired in favor of this having become an automatic kind of built-in functionality that TrueNAS just handles for you in the background with little to no configuration required. This was done for pretty obvious reasons, but maybe I do need to state them. We want TrueNAS to become more automatic in regard to how it safeguards your storage health, with less manual setup and monitoring required, and to help avoid false positives, and also give us the flexibility to continue to enhance monitoring and probes of the system and disks in a variety of new ways which will internally evaluate when conditions have arisen that requires you, the administrator, to go take some action for the maintenance of your storage. That's what storage software does. That's kind of one of its primary mission statements. And this move was to go ahead and, again, replace the idea that we expect you, the administrator, to know how to have this knowledge to do it all manually. That's not really a great experience long-term for software. So again, all good goals, of which, of course, Smart is still being used and playing a role in the background, along with other back-end technologies, which will continue to evolve as time goes on. Some things might be Smart focused, some things may not be. Again, we got to have that flexibility, but that's what good storage software does.
Exactly.
It monitors your storage. That's the whole point.
Exactly. And it's the idea of it being automatic. You don't have to remember to set it up. You don't have to go, oh, this particular drive needs some quirk to make it run the test a different way or something. As a result of this change, of course, we saw the feature request on the forum saying, hey, bring back the old Smart UI for display, scheduling of tests and display of the test results. It generated a lot of discussion. And of course, we were, keeping an eye on it immediately. It prompts, various internal discussions and internal reviews within TrueNAS, of course, which is why you don't see us necessarily. We're not jumping right into the fray right away. When something comes up that's, a big, a very hot button issue, we want to talk about it internally first to make sure that, we've got some internal agreement on things. We want to take a look at that, have those discussions at the high levels and say, are these well-founded arguments to say, we might want to reverse course on this. Passion is fantastic. We love that. We have, thousands of very, very passionate fans and very, very passionate users, and people brought that passion to the topic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right technical direction for where we wanted to go with the product over time to make it, like Kris says, more automatic, more robust, and easier, both for the power users and the novices alike. So it's kind of the challenge of we have to look at that and sort of evaluate the balance of what the what the emotion says and what the logic says.
Yeah. It's a fine line. It's kind of an art here. So there's science, there's art, and there's the blending of the two. And it really is an art of saying, hey, software needs to be powerful enough and smart enough internally, to go and do all the right things so that you, the human, don't have opportunities to keep shooting your foot off or making mistakes because we expect too much of the user. Now, again, some folks will be on the other side of that. Like, oh, I want to be able to twist all the knobs. I like my 747 cockpit, right? And again, that's appropriate, but you wouldn't put that in front of most people who just want to drive down the road.
Yeah. And the key is that the big concern with a lot of them was that, I don't have this UI that tells me a pass-fail test. The pass-fail test doesn't really give you a lot of information. And when you got a mark on that test that said your drive isn't healthy, oftentimes the first thing people would do is they'd say, well, I'm going to jump to the command prompt. I'm going to run smart control -A. You can still do that. Like, we haven't taken that part away. That was always the way. If you were a power user and you wanted to pull those raw counters out of your drive, you were already jumping to the command line. This is where we're making the changes on the back end to say, hey, we're going to look at those counters directly. We're not going to wait for a scheduled test to tell you there's something wrong. We're going to look at those counters directly on the back end and say, hey, as soon as we see something's up, we want to raise that flag before, a weekly or a monthly scheduled test.
Yeah. Assuming the user set it up, right? And again, what if they didn't? Like, all that good stuff. So that's where, again, the software just needs to be good at doing what it does, and its primary purpose is to store and serve data and keep it safe and all that. So this kind of is just in the ballpark of what TrueNAS should do out of box. So long story short, of course, we did review the feedback. Hey, that discussion on the forums was awesome. The feature request, a lot of good conversation there. And that's why we took the time to have some conversations internally and reflect on it and say, yeah, are there certain things that we should do here or not? But at the end of the day, ultimately, we decided the new system is doing what we set out to accomplish, which is make TrueNAS itself smarter in the sense of it just works and it does the right thing with regard to the monitoring of the overall health of the storage in your system, all the storage, all the drives, without needing you, the administrator, to manually go set something up or remember to do so, or a novice administrator to have to go read a guide somewhere and like figure out all these bits to make sure they're doing storage right, quote unquote. This is just kind of basic NAS functionality to begin with, and most serious NAS products do indeed handle this as just a matter of due course. Makes sense. TrueNAS should do the same. So now before anybody asks, it's like, oh, well, they're not going to do anything new. Well, of course, this is an area we're always going to be interested in adding new functionality to. After all, we, Kris and I, and those of us who build and run TrueNAS here, we all care about our storage health just as much as any of you do, probably more so because like this is our livelihood and our passion too. So I even have a short list of things I'd love to see monitored over time as early warning indicators of drive health, beyond even what Smart would have been able to provide to begin with. One example we've talked about, kick the idea around, is looking at drive latencies within a VDEV over time. And if you have, same drives and one of them's acting weird in the sense its latencies are all out of whack with its peers, is that a potential indicator of something going funky? Again, it's a hard problem to solve because it's hard to define and get it right every time. And we don't want false positives causing alarm, or worse, wasting your time and money by pulling a drive, which maybe was legitimately doing some internal firmware things, some other housekeeping. And yeah, it got slow for a period. It happens. Drives are complex. They have their own little microcomputers built in there too. And those firmwares are doing more and more these days. I don't know if you guys caught last week's episode talking about the OpenZFS conference. Guess what? 100 terabyte drives are coming. There's going to be a day in the near future where you don't throw away a drive, even if you lose a whole head and platter. Guess what? Your 100 terabyte drive is now 90 terabytes or 95 terabytes. That's still a lot of usable terabytes that might last another 5 years. Like you don't need to go chuck that all immediately. So a little bit different idea here going forward of what drive health is. And same thing with flash. If you just spent and bought a 30 terabyte flash drive or 60 terabyte, you don't want to have to replace it just because you lost a gigabyte here or there and some cells legitimately died. There's going to be a failure rate that's acceptable. So the software, what TrueNAS needs to do is to get all that right, take all those things into consideration, and then tell you, yep, we're at a point where you need to go do something and it's worth your time and money to go replace.
Absolutely. The challenge with a lot of the firmware indicators and things like that is oftentimes they're kind of black boxes from the vendors. And, we have to make sure that they're sharing all the relevant information. We can certainly, look at a certain subset of the hardware and say, we know how to monitor these drives, but out in the community, you guys have some pretty esoteric choices of hardware at times, we'll say. And,
That's too kind.
we don't want to create like a drive lockdown list for TrueNAS and say, you can only run these drives because those are the only ones we monitor. It's a massive, massive challenge for us to solve. And that's why we're trying to look at the common indicators that are, sort of present across all of these different devices. It's going to take some time. It's going to be a, iterative process as we continue to add more. Like Kris said, drive latencies are something we can see that don't require us to pull drive firmware, but hey, maybe there's a reason this particular device is slow. Mm-hmm. Maybe you mixed and matched different types of drives, and this one is always going to be a little bit slower. Where do we set that threshold to alert it? Is it 10% slower than your other drives? Is it 20%? Yeah. Is it 50%? Maybe, it's going to be a challenge, and we do appreciate that you guys do want to work with us. If there's alerts like this in the community that you feel passionate about, this is like specific probes of a drive, specific conditions that would make sense for an alarm to be thrown. Like, hey, this drive is twice the latency of all the other ones. And it's the same root model. Hey, throw an alarm for that. That's a fantastic suggestion. And, we'd of course consider something like that. And I'm, pretty sure that already exists in the back end, Kris, that is as a feature implementation that we want to put in. The criteria are going to be complex. So we have to weigh each potential probing of these drives and analysis of the metrics against the cost, not just of implementing it, but of maintaining this and of course, the performance at runtime. If you're asking us to pull something from a disk that makes that disk basically have to pause for a millisecond, hey, a millisecond sounds like it's really fast, and maybe for a spinning disk it is. If we cause all of your solid state drives to pause for a millisecond, that's going to result in losing all of that wonderful, consistent performance that we're going after and that we've spent a lot of engineering hours on fixing up in new OpenZFS releases, as well as, of course, how accurate these results are. Is it going to cause more false alerts than good alerts? That's where we talk about the thresholds. People start getting alert fatigue, Chris.
Yeah. Well, that's a real problem, right? If you get alert fatigue and you've trained yourself mentally to just ignore the emails you get from your TrueNAS, that's a bad situation because you will then might potentially miss the real critical alert that means you did have to do something. So that's just as bad and almost in some ways a worse sin.
Exactly. And it's, besides alert fatigue, we say, hey, is this something that's widely applicable? Is it a ZFS level pull for the latencies? Or is this like a very specific smart attribute on a single line of drives? So, and, if it only works on that set of drives, that may be okay. But if it returns something completely different on another, like we're talking about, raw read error rates where some manufacturers return it as a simple incrementing integer. Others return it as a 48-bit binary where the first, 16 bits are the counter and the second 32 bits is the LBA. It's going to show all of a sudden, you have billions of errors on this drive, but it was actually just, no, it's a single error. And here's the LBA where it occurred.
Yeah. Well, hey, one final word on this, Chris, because I don't want to lose sight of this. And I think some folks have kind of forgotten this in the conversation. But at the end of the day, we're all here because we want our storage to work, be performant, be safe, not lose bits. And we have kind of this crown jewel here of ZFS. And for those who don't know some of the history of ZFS, it really was designed way back in the day in the labs over at Sun around this core philosophy that your drives are out to screw you over and they lie to you. That is the design philosophy that went into ZFS and what makes it such a good enterprise file system today and why we do trust all of our data to it. At the end of the day, all this conversation, you always have that last final failsafe of ZFS doesn't believe anything about what your drive's telling you. It's just looking at like, I have checksums, every block is checksummed. Is the drive giving me back what I should have gotten back? If not, we have a problem, Houston, and we need to go investigate, regardless of all the other probes and telemetry we do. So again, let's not lose sight of that as well, that we build this whole, I understand if you're on ext4 or something, or you're on, the old days of different file systems, even the UFS days, you didn't have that luxury. Smart was the best tool you had, which was pretty crummy, but it was still the only tool you had back in the day. So obviously today we have a lot more holistic set of solutions within TrueNAS to, at the end of the day, deliver just good, safe, consistent data performance and integrity. And that's what it's all about here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's a good conversation, Chris.
Yep. With that one sort of sorted for the moment, we'll jump into some viewer questions and some ideas that they had. One of them that came up was people are saying, hey, we've had some challenges, and we saw this from a few people saying, we can't always get these USB install keys created, whether they're trying to use, Rufus or Balena, or they're DDing from Linux or something. They said, how about, could you guys give us like pre-made install USB keys with every major release? And we said, well, we could ship you a USB key, but we'd rather give you something else that's like, include a sticker pack, like a little powered by TrueNAS logo that you can slap on your custom build and say, hey, have a little, show a little support and a little pride in saying, hey, this is protecting my data. So, what do you think about that idea, Chris?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from the community again how much demand there is, because it's one of these things where it comes up from time to time, and we do get the requests like, oh, it'd be great if you had like a USB kit or install kit on Amazon for real cheap, like $20 or something. It doesn't necessarily cost us a lot to do. It's not super expensive for you. And at the end of the day, you get a nice USB stick out of it. Cool. So I guess if there's enough interest, that's absolutely something we could potentially do and put up on Amazon or potentially other retailers down the road, and just make that available and have them, again, preloaded with TrueNAS, ready to install and go. So maybe drop a comment, send us something to t3@truenas.com. We'd just be curious to hear folks' opinion on that. Now, I know a lot of technical folks. You guys already know how to burn keys and burn USB sticks. You do that all day. So this one probably goes out to those who are maybe just starting their TrueNAS adventure and journey, or have had difficulty with this in the past. But again, make your voice heard. If that's something you want, let us know. We'll be receptive to it.
Absolutely. Well, let's start going into the viewer questions here from more specific individuals. We've got one from 2008 MJB. He says, I would love a built-in native S3 option. This opens so many other options like Veeam, etc. At my work, I could think of at least 3 other areas to use it. Well, what do you think of that? Built-in native S3. I think we've been there in the past, Chris.
We had that way back in the day, way back in the core days, actually using MinIO pre-license changes when you could do such a thing with MinIO. Obviously, they've had their own journey since then, and we've documented that here over various episodes. But that may happen again. So we are definitely thinking that route is, do we bring a proper S3 native object storage service directly into TrueNAS? I think that'll happen at some point. Again, TBD. We'll, of course, discuss it here when that gets closer to happening and when it gets scheduled and what release it might happen in. But yeah, that's definitely something I would say is on the roadmap wish list right now.
It's, as Chris mentioned, a lot of that is very license dependent. People like to say, oh, can you just integrate this with TrueNAS? And it's really a question of, well, the first thing we got to do is we got to look at the license of that particular piece of software and say, can we do this, or is this going to immediately get Kris and Chris pulled into the legal department and say, well, guys, what have we told you about that? So
that's the last place I want to have to spend time.
Yeah, I don't want to spend any more time in there than I need to. So, all right. Next question, we have William P 6800, who kind of is talking a bit about our smart implementation. He says, in the video, you guys explained we replaced smart reporting in the interface. It's a feature that gave you sometimes inaccurate info about the health of your drives with something else, which gives you live accurate reportings of errors reading, writing, and checksumming, ZFS, which are a much more accurate indicator of drive health. And of course, saying, that the community members said they wanted SmartBack, that it didn't, maybe it doesn't provide useful information, but they got a nice report. So he asks, what benefit does having the smart reporting provide that, removing it is a genuine loss? He says he's had smart report drives with serious problems. They continue to run fine for 5 years. He kind of stopped paying attention to it so long ago. He says it's about as useful as a stopped clock, but maybe less because it wasn't even right twice a day.
Well, a bit of hyperbole. Smart about as much as a horoscope, which I thought was pretty clever. Yeah, that was good.
maybe a bit of hyperbole, a good bit of humor in there, and we do appreciate that. But what exactly? Like, we did talk about this for a good 15, almost 20 minutes at the start of the episode, Chris. Anything more we want to sort of rehash on here, just to hammer the point in?
This is a common thing we've heard from others, not just you, William, as well. We've seen it internally here. I mean, heck, there's been brand new drives I've had where I'll get a smart error on it, and guess what? It lived all 7 years, never once had an issue, never once had a checksum error, never had a problem with it. But, if I was going purely by the smart alone, I would have said, oh, no, I should be really concerned here. So it's hit or miss, again, and it depends on drive, vendor, all kinds of different things. So yeah, your mileage may vary with that. Now, some folks, again, want to have their PhD in drive mechanics and want to go interpret all the data, and that's cool. Like, we get it. There's folks who like to get under the hood and like change their engine in their car too. That's cool, but that's not most.
And absolutely, like, it's that pass-fail metric is not really telling you that much useful information. When you wanted to get at the guts of it and see what the real health of your drive was and monitor those metrics when you were doing it proactively, you were already digging into smart control. And, that's kind of what we're trying to do behind the scenes is use that smart daemon. We're going to look and alert you when, the spare block threshold on your SSDs is running low, so that, you've got a gauge of SSD endurance to say, hey, this guy's running out. You might want to proactively swap one of these now instead of waiting for all of your SSDs to get close to the wall at the same time. Swap one, then let it resilver and do it along with the next ones.
Yep.
Okay. Here's a good one from Lamp007. So wonder if he's going to call it GoldenEye when he installs it. He says, I wonder if the API is going to have an ability to respond to what version the API call is using, so developers could sort of auto pick up this change or not.
So turns out we do have something similar, or I guess appropriate for that already, Lamp. We have the API call where you can call /API/versions to return a list of what API versions the system you're talking to supports. So I assume you're talking about scripting or writing your own tool. That could be one of the very first things it queries when it connects to the TrueNAS is, hey, my tool was written to use the 2510 API. Okay, cool. You can check, make sure that's present on the TrueNAS you're connecting to. Throw an error for the user or in your script if you do not detect that version is available, and prompt the user to upgrade the tool to the latest version that supports the more modern version. So yeah, that's definitely there. Good luck using it.
Exactly.
All right, let me get the next one here, Chris. So it looks like Frederick Hardy, 884. Please don't forget about Intel GPU.
We haven't. We haven't. No. Yeah. The i915 driver is rock solid. So I assume you're talking about Battlemage and beyond with that XE driver that's had a bit of a bumpy road in the earlier kernels. Like Kris mentioned, we're hoping to get much better support for that in 2604, where we're doing a major kernel bump. I know that one's been a long time coming. I've got a Battlemage card myself, and it hasn't been terrifically useful in host mode in TrueNAS. I've had to, IO pass through it to a VM to get it to be used. And I ended up throwing it in a gaming machine just for some testing on that front. But now that they're starting to come out with the smaller and lower TDP cards, like the B50, the B60, some of those cards, hopefully, maybe we'll see a B30 that's just a little sort of display and transcode card, much like we had the A310. We're hoping for this in 2604. Early results are fairly good. I'm going to have to steal that card back from the gaming rig and test it out to there just to make sure, like libVA isn't still seg faulting when I try to do something as complex as decode H.264.
Mm-hmm. So I will make a note here, Kris, that the 6.18 Linux kernel update will be coming in probably late November-ish, so the end of this month, maybe early December. It really depends on how soon it gets tagged upstream. We're, of course, doing test builds and all that good stuff here. And I mentioned that because we have our nightly images. So if you do have one of these cards and you'd like to pre-validate that 2604 is going to work for it, this is a great test because, again, we don't have all the hardware all the time in all the labs. Now, Kris has obviously a ton of hardware, so he helps us with this, but the more testers, the better. So when that does drop in the nightly images, it would be awesome if you did a update. You can always roll back to your previous version. When you're done, validate, kick the tires, because we did the Debian and Trixie update as well. A lot of libraries, other packages got update. Just confirm things are working. If they're not, it's early enough you can file a ticket because we're still, pre-beta code freeze. We'll have some time to go look at it and see if it's something we can address, if there's, again, another library we got to update or whatnot. But that would be some good feedback to get from you early adopters and more technical enthusiasts.
All right. So
okay. Yes, I'll grab this one here. Sure. So from CidiousX, 2510.0 has been solid on 4 machines for me, other than my hard drives are not spinning down anymore. Bug or new feature?
I would say intentional design. This is kind of a side effect of the drive temp module and sort of smart statistics monitoring. They're going to be polling your drives more frequently just to make sure that they are healthy, they are not, overheating themselves. In general, we recommend against doing spin down on your drives. There's the argument of, starting and stopping your drives too frequently can damage them. And some people will say, well, what if I want them to spin down after an hour or so? The core piece of this is the ZFS, OpenZFS, wants to write sort of those transactional updates, that kind of heartbeat, the Uber block refresh. We've talked about Uber blocks, but that is basically the top level of ZFS where your pool entry point is. It's wanting to write that to your pool periodically as sort of like the, here's your checkpoint, everything's okay as of this transaction group. And the default settings is the timeout on that is 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, it wants to just write that little tick of data to your drives. So unless your spin down timer is less than 5 seconds, you're basically having to queue up those updates and then wake up your drives and dump them all to disk. So for those of you who have sort of hacked it together so that your drive is in fact spinning down and staying spun down for a significant period of time, know that potentially ZFS is queuing up a bunch of stuff in the background going, I really want to update the status of the pool on this disk, but I can't do it because it doesn't want to spin. Or maybe what it's done is ZFS has pushed that update block to the volatile cache of the drives. And it says, hey, drive, you need to write this. And the drive's saying, okay, I'll get to it. Yeah. We again, the
like
short
a contractor
version
in the South.
Yeah, pretty much. The short version is we would recommend against drive spin down. We know that sometimes there's noise concerns, sometimes there's power consumption concerns, but we do have to sort of make that call for the overall health of your system and your data. We recommend against drive spin down. If you're looking to save watts, use a more efficient processor, a more efficient power supply even. don't run unnecessary workload. Maybe say, oh, if I don't need to be constantly transcoding stuff in the background or running, folding at home or something on my NAS. Like that was what you did back in the day. There's probably other areas you can eke out efficiency without potentially putting some, data integrity at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to grab the next one here, Chris?
Yeah, I'll take the next one here from Don Wald 3436, which the main question out of his comment was, can TrueNAS just focus on storage and virtualization solutions? Can just do the NFS mounting of TrueNAS? He says, can we just, stay in our lane and do storage?
Well, of course, you absolutely can do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of users absolutely do that. It's not like apps or VMs are running if you don't start them. Same with protocols you don't use. Look, if you're all SMB, it's not like NFS is going to go turn itself on, or iSCSI or NVMe over Fabric. Just set it up to do that. But by the same token, I could say, well, could my phone just make phone calls? Well, sure. My grandma, used her phone that way. She never ran apps on it. It had the ability to run apps. My mom and dad kind of that way a little too. Like, okay, yeah. Or you can give people the choice to say, yeah, I use it for apps or I use it for phone calls. And, you can do a lot of things. Turns out it's a computer. Computers can do a lot of things well.
Absolutely. And then wrapping up, we're going to go for one last one from Caves Critter. I'm going to pronounce that 5 as an S. He says, noob here. Being new, when I hear you keep mentioning release names instead of version numbers, I'm sometimes lost not knowing if you're talking about an app or your own software. So that's kind of our bad a little bit here. We sometimes will say, electric eel, fangtooth, gold eye, half moon. Those are the alphabetical fish code names we use internally for development. I guess, people just decided that, hey, it's scale. We want to use fish as our code names, like other Linux distros go through that sort of alphabetical ascending code names. We do sometimes mix them up, but we're making a conscious effort to try and explain, like when we say, Goldeye 25.10, we'll put them together at least early on in the episode to make sure that it's really clear what we're talking about. We tend to try to use the version number once it hits a full release. When we're still talking about a version in development, sometimes it's the code name, so Chris will talk about Half Moon.
We're trying to do that in print too. When we go and do, blogs and other things, make sure we give the full, like, hey, here's the code name and here's the version number. Because we've had feedback. We've actually asked folks in the community this before, and the consensus was people like having both because it's easy to remember the code name. Sometimes version numbers, it's easy to get jumbled up. There's a lot of versions. We're doing a release every 6 months. So that's a lot of version history already. But it's kind of easy to remember, I want that Half Moon update, or I want that Goldeye update. That's the cool, exciting thing.
Exactly.
That has the feature I care about.
And plus it gives us opportunities to do a little cool fish art and make mascots and stuff like that.
Yeah, we like that. Sticking with that nautical theme.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us as we navigate the sometimes choppy seas, looking for our fish to catch. We appreciate all of the comments that you give us, even if we don't get to respond to them every time. Once again, thank you for tuning in today. Please do the usual YouTube things. Give us a like, subscribe to T3. Send us emails, t3@truenas.com. Please continue to post your comments below in the comment section. Engage with us on the forums. And Chris and I will see you next time.